All right, well, the time has finally come for my new steel building to go up. This has been a long-awaited project, lots of patience required, but we're coming up on the deadline. It's supposed to go up next week, and we had to get the slab ready. Everything seems to be in order. They've come and checked it out. It seems like it's going to be happening. Now, me being skeptic, I'm not going to believe it till I see it, but all signs point to we're a go for the new building going up. So there was a couple issues with my slab when they did come check it out. I'm a little nervous that they might not be able to work around them, or they will. I don't know. But the slab is pretty far out of level. It slopes down to this back corner, so they're going to have to do some massaging to get everything to fit right. But assuming they can work around that, we are all systems go. So if you're unfamiliar with this saga, you may be asking yourself, why do you have this old slab with no building on it? Why do you have this lift just sitting there by itself? Well, let me take you back a little bit and explain how we got here. Basically, I bought this house a little over a year ago, and it had this pole barn workshop already here, and that was definitely a big selling point. Now, there were some downfalls to this particular pole barn workshop, but the rest of the property kind of made up for it. I really liked the lot layout, the lot size, the immense amount of parking, the big mature trees. That's something I've always really liked, having big trees on a property. You know, you've got a lot of shade, especially here in Florida. The house already had an attached garage that was extra wide. You know, there was plenty of room for extra storage in there. You know, 2 more cars could be inside, so on and so forth. But the one thing, the elephant in the room, was the shop. The way the shop was, it was open in the front. So essentially, the front 32 feet was open and the back 16 feet was enclosed. So that was a big problem. That was, from the start, not what I wanted long term. I wanted to close it in. Now, I originally planned on closing it in myself. I have construction experience. I mostly knew how to do it. Framing for the roll-up doors was one thing I wasn't sure on, something I hadn't done before. But other than that, I figured it wouldn't be too bad. But once I got into the place, I decided, you know, I knew I needed permits for it. I didn't want to try to do this without permits and get in trouble and have to worry about that and deal with it. So I decided to just hire someone to do it, get it done quick, get it permitted, so on and so forth. So I found a contractor to do it, and this is where things kind of go awry. We started down the permit process, and it just didn't go very well. It was kind of a mix of the contractor, you know, they wouldn't respond for sometimes a month, and then they weren't giving the city what they were asking for, so then the city kind of just kept asking for more and more and more stuff, and it just got to a point where we couldn't get the city what they were asking for. They wanted signed and sealed architectural drawings saying, hey, you know, if it's closed in this way, it's going to meet code. And the problem with that was this building was built in '98. So the back already enclosed portion wouldn't meet code, and no one really wanted to put their name on that. So we were kind of stuck. So I'd been upgrading the shop in the meantime, working on things, odds and ends, lighting. I mean, the shop needed a lot of work. And even as it was, I was so excited to have my own dedicated workspace. I have never had my own space. I've always shared it with people, and I like organization. I like things being neat and in their place, and it was so nice to have that, but it was always had that lingering part where it's temporary. You know, all the valuable stuff's in the enclosed portion, all the non-valuable stuff or less valuable stuff is outside, and I couldn't really set it up the way I wanted until it was closed in. So we're stuck. We don't know what to do. The only option besides living with it as it was, closing it in some way that somehow skirts to the permitting, you know, using like a gate at the front so it wouldn't really fully be enclosed, or doing it without a permit. Besides those options, the option was tear it down and build a new one. Now, this is a tough pill to swallow, but I knew at the end of the day I wouldn't be happy with the other options, and it was just one of those things. We just had to bite the bullet and do it. So I ordered a steel building. There was a lead time of about 3 months from the time the permit was done. That would have put us somewhere September, October, which then got pushed to November. So in the meantime, we had to make a plan for what to do with all my stuff. So I bought a 20-foot shipping container. I got it delivered and stuffed in the far back corner of the backyard so that we could store all the big bulky items, the stuff that we didn't need access to or couldn't use in a garage. In the meantime, keep them there, keep them protected while we tore down the shop and waited to build the new one. So since we needed a place to work in the short term while we were waiting for the whole shop saga to sort itself out, I decided to turn my garage into a temporary workshop. So we stripped it down, we painted it, we cleaned it up, and we tried to fit as much equipment and tools and everything as we could so that it would be a fully functioning workshop. And we really managed to get everything in here we needed: tire machine, compressor, belt grinder, welders, welding table, toolbox. We really had everything we needed to have essentially a full functioning workshop in the meantime while we dealt with the shop saga, which would give us more time to sort that all out before we move back in. So with all the support systems in place, it was time to tear the old building down. I spent a year in this place and it was kind of tough to see it go, but as much as it made me sad to see it go, I was so excited that we were finally taking steps towards this process being over. We were getting there, and don't get me wrong, I was a little nervous that we'd tear this building down and they'd tell me it was going to be another month or two, but it was supposed to be going up in a couple of weeks. We had to get it down so that way, if it all did go through, it was ready. So we started tearing it down board by board, piece by piece, until we got it to the point that you see it at today, which is a bare slab. Now, there's still a couple things left to do to this thing before we're ready for the new building to go up. So the first step in the process was grinding down all of these concrete anchors that were used to secure the perimeter walls, the support posts, so on and so forth. These were all going to be in the way of where the new building's frame needed to lay. Now, another thing that was in the way was this plumbing. This plumbing came up through the perimeter wall. We've got a drain and we've got 3 water feeds. Now, I wanted to plug these off as best I could so that if I wanted to use the other plumbing that was more towards the center and not in the way in the future, we wouldn't have water gushing up from underneath the frame of the building. So I filled the water feeds with silicone, I put plugs in them, I hammered them down flush, put some more silicone on top, tried to seal them off as best I could so that we could use the water in the future. Now, we also have to deal with this drain that's on the perimeter. Now, for this drain, what I did was I put a rag in there as a stop, filled it with concrete to try to give the building a nice flat surface to lay on. Now, we also had this conduit to deal with that was in the middle. This is where the power came into the building before it came up on that dividing wall. Now, we're not going to have a dividing wall. It's going to come up on the outside wall, so we needed to fill that in as well. Now, the biggest project we needed to take care of before the building went up was to dig out this area. So this was presumably for a bathtub or something. We weren't going to use it, so we wanted to fill it up mostly with concrete. Now, we didn't go crazy and try to get it perfectly level with the rest of the slab. We just wanted to get it filled in roughly, and then we could come back later and seal it, smooth it out, and make it as if it was never there. But for this part, we just mainly wanted to fill it with concrete so that it wasn't a big hole with dirt in it, and it was a little easier to do while the slab was empty. So with that done, it was time. We're ready for the new building to go up. So these guys wasted no time in getting this building up. When I woke up at 7:30, this is how far they had already gotten. So there's basically a track that runs along the perimeter, and you can see those little stakes sticking up. Those are essentially studs that the main support's set down on. Now, what that allows them to do is level it out. They can bring it up a little bit in certain areas to account for an unlevel slab, which unfortunately ours was exactly that, a very unlevel slab. So they fly these things up with the boom lift, they set them down on the stakes, and then they attach them to the stakes. So by probably 9 a.m., they had all of these supports up. And this is what the building looked like with the supports up. And now you can kind of start to see how tall this thing really is. And you see it starting to take shape and what the overall size is going to be. Now, compared to the old building with 11.5-foot walls, this one seems absolutely massive. It's really interesting, too, that I've learned from, having the old building there, tearing it down, and this one going up, is that it actually looks way smaller when there's nothing on it. When there's no walls, no anything, just a bare slab, it honestly looked tiny. And as things start to go up, it starts to look bigger and bigger and bigger. So with these up, we got the first glimpse of what the actual building is going to look like, and man, it's finally happening. It's real. I said I wouldn't believe it until I saw it. Well, I believe it now. I believe it. It's going up. So the next step in the process was to get the stringers on the roof, essentially, and that's going to square up the building. These uprights don't have a whole lot of structure until you start attaching them to each other. So they did that. They got all the stringers on, which is what the roof panels are going to attach to, and they got the framing for the bay doors done. So you can see we now have supports at the front and end of the building, and we have openings in the shape of what our doors are going to be. Now, this is where I wanted to put another man door, and I waited too long. I thought about it after the fact, so I didn't get it added on to the building in time. It's something we'll probably go back and add later, but for now, it's not a big deal. We've still got plenty of doors to work with, entrance and exit. So with that done, the next step was the roof. So they got all of the roof panels on, and this was a pretty monumental moment because now my lift is finally undercover. And luckily they were cool enough to work around the lift. I asked them, I double checked with them. I didn't want them to show up and be surprised by it. So I asked, I confirmed, and they said, no problem, we'll work around the lift. So that was huge. Huge shout out to the guys who did the building, because that saved me so much time having to take that lift down, put it somewhere just to put it right back in its same spot. So point is, now we've got the roof up, and this is kind of what I would call pavilion mode. And at this point, this thing's looking really, really, really tall. Now all that's left is the siding, the doors, the main framing. All right, well, here it is. The shop is essentially complete as far as the main structure is concerned. Now, there's plenty more to do, but the main structure is built, siding's on, doors in. The only thing we are waiting on to finalize the main structure is the front bay doors. So there's a separate company that installs the big bay doors. So those are supposed to go in sometime this week. Hopefully that all pans out, because once that's done, we can move on, finish out the permit on the structure, and then start on all the other projects down the road. So before we get into that stuff, let me give you a rundown of the building itself. It is a 30 by 48 steel building. We went with 16-foot walls. So you might be wondering why such tall walls. Well, I figured if I was going to tear the whole building down and rebuild it, I wanted to go bigger if I could. Now, the only way to go bigger on the footprint was to pour new concrete, and we're limited anyway by what we can do according to code based on the size of the principal structure. So the secondary structure, they call it, can only be a certain percentage of the square footage of the principal structure. So I think we could only go like 200 square feet bigger. At the time, it didn't seem worth it. In hindsight, knowing I was gonna wait for the building as long as I did, it might have been worth it to do it, but it's kind of a whole nother can of worms. So the simplest solution was to just go taller and gain the storage that way. Do a little walk around here. Obviously at the front, we've got the two 12 by 12 bay doors. So it went pretty much as big as we could. We could have gone 14, but I don't think I have anything that's gonna need to go through a 14-foot door. So just went with 12 by 12s, which pretty much opens up the whole front of the shop. We've got about 2 feet there and 2 feet on either end. So that's really nice. We can open up this area and almost have essentially like there's no front wall here. So that's nice. Moving on to the side here, we have our man door. So nice, easy walk from the house down the driveway. Now, obviously, I'm going to put a little concrete walkway here once this is all done and dusted. But then we've got our man door, and you pop in, boom, right into the back corner of the shop. So moving down this side, we have 2 windows. I wanted to put some windows on it just to get some natural light in, be able to see in, but I didn't want to go crazy with the windows because you start to struggle with the balance of natural light, overpowering your actual light, and I didn't want to go too wild. So we just have 2 little windows there. Coming around the back, now this turned out really good. I'm really excited for this. So we've got 2 windows back here and an 8 by 8 bay door. Now the idea behind that was, one, we get cross flow. So if it's a nice day like this, we open up all the doors and you get that airflow flowing through. And it makes a huge difference to have a second door for the air to flow through. So that was pretty much the main reason. The other reason is, ideally, down the road, we're settled in here for a little bit, I'm gonna add a lean-to off the back. And what I'd really like to do is put either that container or another container back here, build the lean-to to it, use it as the structure for the lean-to, and then do a concrete pad back here to park cars and stuff on. So that's the long-term goal, but that's down the road. That's just ways that we can get more and more storage without going bigger on the principal building. So coming around here, this is the most bland side of it all, obviously. No windows, no doors. Now, like I said, I did want to add a door there just because it's got that concrete landing, but that's something we can worry about after the fact. It's not a big deal to cut open a hole and pop a door in there. We can get the material and get it done. But otherwise, this side doesn't have anything on it. I didn't feel it was worth it to put windows on this side since you're not really going to see anything. This is where I park both my trailers. And then that way we get more wall space that we're not having to block windows if we want to put stuff on the wall. So definitely gives you an idea of how tall it is, especially because the ground slopes this way. It's a good sized building, man, and I love it in this color. I normally struggle picking colors, but this was a really good safe bet. Nice light gray with charcoal gray accents. It looks it looks really good. I'm really happy with how the color combo came out. I want to paint my house to match it. You know, same thing, light gray, charcoal gray, and white accents. I think that'll look really cool to have them both matching, but not a huge priority right now. So going inside definitely looks and feels way bigger than my old shop did now that we've got so much higher ceilings and everything's all open in one area. You can see with 3 cars in here, it's still a pretty decent sized building. Like, you know, obviously you always want bigger. And if you ask any car guy who has a shop or wants a shop, you know, we could go with a 10,000 square foot, 100,000 square foot building if we could. But I do like efficiency, and I feel like, I've always felt like this size would be perfect for me and pretty much do everything I need to do. If I grow out of this, I've got a problem and I need to get rid of some stuff, either cars or parts, you know, especially if we add that lean-to on the back. We have 2 containers for kind of unsightly stuff that we want to keep out of the way. If we run out of storage, we need to start getting rid of some stuff. So I think this size should suit us for the long term. That's how I feel right now, at least. Ask me in 5 years, you know, who knows. But yeah, so waiting on the main doors to go in. Once those go in, we can get the inspection done, and then hopefully the main structure is done and dusted. We're good to go. We can move forward with the next steps. Now, the order of operations for the next steps. Basically, we need to start with electrical. We're gonna run a new service from the house. The old shop had that service coming up in that dividing wall. We're gonna bring it up on the outside wall. We're also gonna upgrade the service. It was only 40 amp service coming from the house before. We're gonna do 100 amp service. So get the electrical in. You know, I'm gonna ideally add as many outlets as I can possibly add. I don't want to regret not doing enough later in the long term, outlets and switches and lights. That was one of the big incentivizing factors for me of rebuilding the shop like this instead of trying to figure out how we could close it in the way it was being able to start from scratch and do everything right the first time. I'm sure we'll have regrets. I'm sure there's things that we'll wish we had done differently, but try to do as much as we can with what we've learned from working in the space for a year. So I'd like to get electric door openers, maybe not so much for the back door, but at least for the front doors. So, you know, going on a test drive, I can just press a button and they close. We're gonna run internet out here and it should be really cool. So once the electrical's done, we can do the spray foam insulation, get the spray foam done, and then we can drywall it. I don't know for sure if we'll use drywall, but just something to panel the walls and make them look nice, paint them white. We'll probably paint the ceiling black, and that kind of just makes it disappear. You know, when you have white walls and a black ceiling, and it hides the spray foam. Spray foam is very effective, but very unsightly. So that's the goal there, obviously. Walls, paint it. At some point in that mix, we're gonna do the floors, get the floors done, either do them ourselves or have someone do them, you know, fill in all the cracks, epoxy them, so on and so forth. Once those things are done, we can move back in. There is still one more project I want to do, and that is a loft. So that was the big reason for going with a 16-foot wall, is we can build a loft that goes above that bay door and still have standing height out at the corner. So you could walk around on the loft, we can put shelves on the loft. We're effectively adding 600 square feet to the building size by being able to have a loft like that. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna have someone build the loft or if I wanna build the loft. It really comes down to time. I would like to build it myself. It'd be a fun project, but it's just a matter of time. We got, you know, 3 non-running vehicles, projects that have to get done at deadlines, and there's a lot to do. But at least the loft we can do after the fact. The loft doesn't have to get done immediately. Everything else, though, really does need to. Otherwise, we're gonna be shifting stuff in and out. So that was the reason for making the garage as suitable as possible so that we could stay in there as long as needed to get this done fully before we move in. It's gonna be a lot easier to do all this stuff now than trying to move in and move out and move in and move out. So I know that was a mouthful, but that is the game plan. That is a tour of the shop. So hopefully everything goes well. We get the doors in here in a couple days. We get that sorted and start down the line of the next thing. So it's essentially done. You know, with the doors, the main structure will be done, but we do still have a decent road to go on finishing the shop. So I'll bring you guys along for all of it. I know I enjoy the shop stuff as much or if not more than the car stuff. So we'll definitely cover the whole build series, but it's a huge step for me to finally have this building up. Been waiting and waiting, and at times it seemed like it might never happen, and to finally have it here, it feels surreal. I'll feel a lot more of the weight off my shoulders when the main structure inspection and all of that's done, and when the actual building's completely done and we move back in, it's when it's really gonna hit. So look forward to all of that, but for now, that's gonna be a wrap. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. I hope to see you guys next time. Goodbye.